one of the most important things is perspective work. Looking at things more holistically or taking a step back and broadening the focus. If there's a week and the week has been difficult, my life didn't start on the Monday. So it makes it easier to realize that you're banking on things you've already done, as opposed to feeling every day I wake up, I have to make sure that like this day in its entirety has to be perfect from beginning to end.
You're pushing me, and how do I keep myself calm? You see the way you're super calm, you chill and everything. And then me still in my head, even right now, I'm like, that donut.
And you can tell yourself, these things make me angry and it's no fault of my own. But it's like, what are you actively doing to make sure that your contact with them is minimized? And then that gets into the responsibility is yours. And this is the unfair thing about everything that we're talking about.
I thought I was normal until people started pointing out that, dude, your road rage is horrible. Dude, the way you react, you were never this angry. And I'm like, okay, I'm angry.
The signs are there. You have to be willing to see them. So the things that were happening to you, they've happened to a lot of people, but you had to choose. Somebody can't make you choose, but you chose to be like, this breakup has happened. What role did I play?
What would be the worst things that would happen should they continue down the route of not managing their anger and not managing the stress? And what have you seen in your practice?
Okay, at the risk of sounding dramatic, death.
Drama.
No, death. That's the worst, because if you can't control your anger and you're in situations where you're too quick to anger and you lose your temper, what can that lead to? You can be in situations which can end up being fatal. Because of a moment of madness, you can lose your life. Somebody else can lose theirs.
You're listening to the Men's Forum.
Your guide to being a better man.
Here we talk about everything to do with dealing with the nuances of life as a man.
This is your safe space to finding solutions to any problem you could be facing as a man.
We're your hosts Rajveer and Shalin, and we're sitting down with guests who share their personal experiences and insights, adding depth and new perspectives to our discussions.
Anger, an emotion that can be used as a weapon and often the most dangerous in the hands of men. Today's guest is Aldo, a seasoned psychologist who shares his expert insights on why anger management is particularly important for men and how unaddressed anger can affect every aspect of our lives. We discuss practical strategies for recognizing triggers and handling emotions constructively. If you're a man who struggles with anger in your workplace, business, relationships, or other aspects of your life, this discussion will provide valuable tools and perspectives. Let's get into it. Aldo, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we can just start off by, you can introduce yourself and then we just get straight into it.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a counseling psychologist, which means I deal with therapy with individuals, families, and couples as well. And that's essentially talk therapy. There's many different modalities or approaches people have. So it depends on what your expertise is, but it's helping people work through issues.
There's one thing that I was really fascinated by when we were planning to have you on board as a guest is your reels.
Okay.
Yeah, and you guys reminded me of them actually when we were setting up. You take a breath before you share your message. So what's the whole idea behind that?
The interesting thing is it's something I would do just before I spoke. So when I'm making reels, I will write stuff down, but I don't necessarily script it. So as I know what I want to talk about, it's, okay, this is how we're going to go. And it's just something that I do. What made me laugh about it was how many people would ask. So be like, why'd you take a breath? I'd be like, I take a breath because it's just how I collect myself. And people would really follow up about it. And then there was points when I wouldn't do it. People were like, where's the breath in this video? And I'm like, how is that a comment? I'm like, what about the meat of the video? And they're like, nah, where's the breath though? Bring it back. And so I didn't realize that it was such a thing. But obviously watching it back, it's just, I guess, to center my thoughts before I jump into what I want to say.
Okay. I think where I was kind of leading with that, and it's interesting you say it like that because I thought it was just some sort of like, breath work type of thing. But like in your mind, like with your clients or like yourself, have you employed other forms of breath work to get you to maneuver life in a better way?
I think the interesting thing is with the breath work and meditation and things, I want to get into it more. What will happen for me in terms of managing is sometimes taking a beat. So when you have a bunch of things that you need to do and thoughts kind of overlap with each other. So like I have to do one, and before you even finish thought number 1, 2, and 3 are kind of jostling for space. And it's like, yeah, you can have a lot of things, but don't let them kind of stack on top of each other. So just having the stillness of, okay, I need to do one thing. Let me do that one thing. 2 is still going to be there. Let me wait first. Because I found myself in times like I have so many things to do today. And it's like, let me not juggle. Let me just do things one at a time. And I'll manage to get through. It's not like the stuff is less, but it helps me manage and cope, because otherwise it can be frenetic. And I'm like, I'm never going to manage because everything is just kind of jostling for first place.
I was going to come to stillness because I was watching all his videos and we started, I'm like, this man probably understands the technique of just getting into stillness. Like even whenever we start our podcast, if I've had a crazy day, he reminds me and we're like, bro, sit down. Just chill. Take a few breaths in, get into stillness. And after you feel you're okay, let's start. Take a minute or two. So his videos is all about, okay, this man really knows the technique.
Yeah. And dude, you even when you present yourself, you just seem so like calm and collected. You're just like,
yeah, you got a good, you've got a calm aura. Yeah, it's so true.
Aura.
It's so true. Like the way you speak, you're just like, And then there's all of us.
No, and that's the funny thing is, that's something else which I guess I've been told a lot of. The job for me is mostly listening. So talking is important. And if it's social media, people see me like, yeah, you talk. But the majority of my job is if somebody comes in, for example, and you're having a tough spot, I need to listen to what it is that you're saying and then help you pick through. So what I was talking about, the stillness, now it's my job to be like, okay, if there's 15 things, let's address what we can address and make sure that we actually make progress. And the calmer you are, it helps, I guess, people realize that, okay, maybe we can slow this down a bit. And so it's basically holding space. Because let's say if my energy is also hectic. So you've come in and you're like, my day was hectic. I'm like, also mine. I mean, I got loads of clients to see. Things are rough for me too. All of a sudden, a space which is meant to be for you is too full of my own things. And then we can't progress.
So what kind of techniques do you employ in your own life to get there besides, well, you mentioned that you're trying to get into breathwork or meditation. So like how do you kind of get yourself into that space?
For me, one of the most important things is perspective work. So looking at things more holistically or taking a step back and broadening the focus. So if there's a week and the week has been difficult, my life didn't start on the Monday. There's all the stuff that I've been doing previously. And so even if there's difficulty or there's trouble, being, okay, this is a point in time, but it doesn't erase all the other stuff I was doing before. So it makes it easier to realize that you're banking on things you've already done, as opposed to feeling every day I wake up, I have to make sure that like this day in its entirety has to be perfect from beginning to end. You have to look at it as more of a continuum, as opposed to isolating and saying things have to be great now. Because what we can really easily do is we can minimize what we do beforehand. So you might have been having a great month and then there's a speed bump and you're like, okay, this speed bump is the most important thing. And it's like, it isn't. It can be a setback, but please don't forget, because we often forget the kind of stuff that we've been doing before.
So how can viewers watching this actually start applying that?
It starts with honesty. So you have to ask yourself, what have you been doing? Now, it could be good, it could be bad, but you have to ask yourself, what have I been doing? Because you're not just dropped in there at random. You've been taking steps. Now, which steps you're taking are up to you, but there's something that happened before. And if you're talking about trying to get more stillness or make an improvement, you have to look and say, these steps that I've been taking, what do I need to begin to shift? And then you start with one step. So not how can I overhaul my entire personality in a day, which is impossible. And if that is your goal, you're always going to fail that every time. So it's, what have I been doing? What do I want to start doing? And what is almost the smallest increment that I can focus on? And then do that. And before you say, I haven't done the big thing, focus on the small. Because people want to run before they can walk. It's like, that's not the way it works. If you overlook this stuff, you're not going to be able to get to where you want to go.
Okay, so small incremental steps. It's interesting that you say this, because right now we've been sort of facing this challenge where we're both so overwhelmed with our businesses. And then when it comes to, running the men's forum and everything that's involved, it it's more than overwhelming, and then we start feeling frustrations and anger. Luckily, because of the forum, we've started growing this level of awareness where we can still take a step back and just be like, hey, we need to have a hard conversation. Can we get on a phone call and have the hard conversation? But sometimes it's difficult. And I feel like a lot of men out there don't have the same awareness. So the anger just leads them to lashing out either on their family or, their relationships, or they sabotage their own whatever they're working on.
Lack of awareness, and then the outlet is not to the person that it's directed to, but it comes out to probably other people as well.
Yeah. So how can people start managing that?
The thing about your question is, you guys were talking about like all the things you're doing, business and then running this. It's, do people take stock about what's going well, even when you're in the midst of doing something? For example, when like you got in contact with me and then like I'm checking out your stuff and I'm like, this is really awesome. Obviously, I'm not behind the scenes. So even if you were pulling out your hair before the scene, you got on camera, you were composed, you asked men questions about their life and how did you get here? And I was like, this is really well put together. I did not see the difficulty. But also I know, let's say you might do something and you look at a mistake and you'll say, this could have been better. I could improve this. Are you looking at that mistake and also saying, but all this stuff also went really well? So you're taking everything. And it's good to focus on what went wrong to improve it, but what went wrong can't take up your whole field of view. So with what you're saying about frustration is, anger is a normal thing. We all feel it. The issue is that sometimes the focus on it is too much. And so you look at all the negatives, kind of stack those together and be like, this is all that's going on. And then, of course, it's very easy to get angry because you're just going from negative to negative and you take the positive for granted. So you don't look at it as a good thing. You say, well, this is supposed to work. So you pay it no mind. Then when something goes wrong, you hyper-focus. And so guys are skewed in the way they focus on things. And so it makes it a lot easier to magnify frustrations. And then it'll seem like all I'm doing is the wrong thing. Somebody might tell you the podcast is great, and it is. But then you're saying, nah, but you know what I have in my mind or what I need to be doing. And you're going through all these things and it's fine. You want them to improve, but you also have to understand that things are going well and those need to be acknowledged also.
That's a good. Thank you for giving us perspective.
Yeah, it is a really good perspective.
Because we have conversations about like the quality, and he's a perfectionist when it comes to quality. And if there's any way like in the past where I'd be like, can we bypass? It's like no quality. So now when he sends me a message about something and I see quality shit, I'll tell him, bro, you didn't check. You didn't do this. This quality shit. Can we? So now it's okay. Again, it's because we're working hand to hand. We rub off each other. He has his positives. I have my positives. Maybe I'm systematic. Maybe I'm strategic.
You're super systematic and strategic.
And he's like to the core. Like this detail has to be this. This detail has to be this. Again, when it comes to camera, it's like, oh, ISO this 4K frame, this 8K. And I'll be like, okay. I don't understand, Jack. Same thing with the social media. He'll give me strategies, like, this is what you should do, this is what you do. I'm like, bro, but this guy does this. Like, why are you following that guy? You listen to me. I'm like, yeah, okay, fine. I'm going to listen to you. So it makes sense that anger, it comes from a lot of triggers. And sometimes now that we effectively communicate with each other, we'll be like, okay, shit, this was the root cause. Like yesterday's conversation, we were speaking and we were being honest that this is what you did right, this is what you did wrong. Same with me, this is what you did right, this is what you did wrong. Now I feel better as a human being because now I'll work on that. Same thing, we'll go back and he'll work on it. But then coming to that awareness point, we were like, okay, I'm flipping. What was good? What was the good out of it? Now that is the most challenging bit. Finding that, not just awareness, I don't know the correct term, that in terms of your mind coming down to the thought process of angry, and this is what is good.
Because again, like we're speaking from perspectives of guys who have, I don't know how, I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but we've sort of evolved in our like spiritual journeys, Kidogo.
Talk that talk, man.
Yeah.
It's important. If you have, then you have.
Yeah. So we've sat down and there's one of the things that when we were sitting on the table earlier, you mentioned that people don't want to accept what's wrong with them. And we have done that. We have accepted like what the hell is wrong with us and we have sat to work on it. Right. But a lot of guys who are watching this podcast, have not started their journeys yet,
Mm-hmm.
right? So again, they're facing like a shitload of anger.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand what you're saying is you need to interrupt the pattern of anger and say, hey,
Mm-hmm.
I'm grateful for how far I've come.
Mm-hmm.
So what advice would you give to men in that circumstance? Okay, actually, wait, I think let's reel this back a little bit. What does anger sort of stem from?
That's a good question. Now, this one, I had a lecturer who told me this, and when she said it, you know, when somebody tells you something, you're like, I'm never going to forget. I knew in that moment, I was like, that's changed my life. So anger is a secondary emotion. That means that there's always one stop before it. So sadness, it can be fear, it can be embarrassment. There's something that happens, and then you get angry. Because anger is an emotion that you can wield. You can be angry at somebody. I can be pissed off at you, and it makes me feel powerful. I can't be sad at you. I can be sad because of you. But I can't wield sadness. Like it's not, it doesn't look strong, you know? Like it doesn't look tough. But anger does. And so shame, for example, when like men are embarrassed, what will you often see? You'll see them trying to deal with it, and then it crystallizes into something more firm. And then you can be angry. So the question becomes, where does the anger come from? Or more accurately, what is the emotion that preceded it? So what happened? And guys will say, I don't know. That's not true. It might be uncomfortable and you don't want to talk about it, but something happened beforehand that led to you becoming angry. And especially when it's things like sadness, embarrassment, shame, they wouldn't want to get into it because they know why. Something happened and now let's take the example of like rejection. So you can say you're pursuing a woman or something, it doesn't work out and the guy will be pissed off. It's embarrassing. It hurts. And so you're over there with this pain and you're like, no, people can't see me feel pain. Let me be upset. Let me say, I never wanted that anyway. Everything's wrong with her. I'm okay. It's like you're not okay. And that's not a bad thing, but it's always about the preceding emotion. So when you're dealing with anger, you have to rewind first to be like, what made you angry? And not like a surface level answer. Be like, no, genuinely, what got you here? The difficulty when you stockpile it for so long is you have to ask that question a lot. And you have to go back to things which you want to forget, but are still there. And that's usually what is driving you to be quicker to anger. Because the more stockpile of emotions that you have, the quicker your trigger is. Now it's not going to take much at all. And so things which seem minor, it's like it's jumping onto the pile. And then that's why for so many guys, it's so easy to explode.
So back to the question, what would be the technique to come into awareness at that very moment of time?
You have to ask yourself whether, now you're saying whether it's in therapy, whether you guys are talking about the friendship that you have and that element of honesty, that thing, how important it is. Be like, okay, no, what are you doing? And I'm not trying to hurt you, but I need to know. To have somebody or a place where you can acknowledge why you are upset. That is where it starts. Because you can't deal with the problem if you don't know what the problem is. You can do all this busy work, but it's like, why are you angry? If you cannot answer that question, then you can't start doing the work. And it doesn't have to be that you know intricately the ins and outs of yourself, even if it's working backwards. Be like, what upset you can be like, what upset you today? Fine. Why did that upset you so much today? Was there something else from before? What kind of spot were you in when you woke up? If you're in traffic and you road rage and you want to kill somebody else, be like, okay, where were you at? Genuinely. Because for most people, they'll be on, let's call it 80, 90%. So you're always one small incident away from blowing up. And so those are the questions. So as we're saying, for the guys watching, you have to begin to ask, why am I angry? And again, the answers to those questions aren't comfortable, but they're often necessary.
How can someone get to that place of asking themselves, why am I angry? And this, just to give you a little bit of context in this question, is that I went through a period of my life where I was angry and I thought it was normal. And not that I thought that anger is normal. I thought I was normal until people started pointing out that, dude, your road rage is horrible. Dude, the way you react, you were never this angry. And I'm like, okay, I'm angry. But if no one pointed that out to me, this is something that went on for months. And of course, something that goes on for months, it becomes a habit, it becomes a part of you. So how do you come to that point where you sit down and say, actually, I think I am an angry person and this needs to change?
Okay, before I answer that, how did you come to that point, seeing as you had the experience and you've had such growth, as you've been telling me on and off camera? So what shifted it for you?
Well, I went through a breakup.
Okay.
And I realized, I was like, whoa, okay, these are things that I did then, which were not the greatest. And they stemmed from anger. Yeah.
But the thing about it is, a breakup doesn't have to be reflective. You could have broken up and you could have still blamed her for it. You could have
Exactly. Yeah.
So now it comes down to the individual in terms of the signs will be there. They're not hidden. When somebody is too upset, people will tell them. It might be you enter a room and people kind of like back away from you. They don't want to occupy the same space. The signs are there. You have to be willing to see them. So the things that were happening to you, they've happened to a lot of people, but you had to choose. Somebody can't make you choose, but you chose to be like, this breakup has happened. What role did I play? As opposed to pointing and say, what's wrong with her? You know, she lost me. She would have just done all these things. It would have worked out. You had to choose to ask what you did. And so you have to make that choice because the change happens after that initial choice. Some men make it as you did and you see what's on the other side, but it isn't easy to make because then you're looking at yourself and saying, that was less than ideal. I was not doing good. I was not healthy. And that sucks to tell yourself. But by saying that, now you can start to do the healthy things. But you have to choose.
Self-realization is such a bitter pill.
The bitterest, and it's optional. People walk around with lack of self-awareness. You don't die. You honestly don't. So the work is difficult. The pill is bitter. And it's some of the most important work that you can do. But you don't have to do it.
I remember there was a time me and him were arguing and then he called me up and he's like, blah, blah, blah. We went at each other on the phone. Then after half an hour, I'm like, dude, why were you so pissed? Then I realized I had so much of a back history to why I didn't want to lose that moment or that episode or whatever, because I had so much. Remember that I told him, because you're not going to be around. We have all this lined up. If we don't have guests, all that's at the back of my subconscious because I'm like, we won't have this, we won't have this, we won't have this. We have this content thing to do. But I didn't tell him all that. I was just flipping. I'm like, why the fuck can't you show up for the episode? You took a few days off. I've not taken any days off. We got to do the podcast. But then after half an hour, I'm like, I'm so sorry. It came down to all this here.
But you know, also other places where this applies is the same thing with like the guys that my team. You know, it's we need to get this done. Why isn't this done? Why isn't that done? Why isn't that done? But at the back of my mind, I'm dealing with clients have expectations. Am I hitting those expectations? Are we good enough? Are we getting the results? And these guys don't know that I have those insecurities. And so that's turning into, it's rooting into anger, right? Like you said, it becomes that weapon.
It does. And it becomes, can you communicate your anger in a non-explosive manner? So again, the emotion gets vilified. Anger is an emotion like anything else. The problem, it's like when any emotion is expressed in a healthy way, you can be happy in toxic ways. There can be things you do, it's like, yeah, you're happy. You shouldn't have done that. You know, have some restraint, sadness as well. So now with anger, it's an element of you're angry about something. Does that mean that you bit somebody's head off? Does that mean that you cuss somebody out? Or is it a matter of, why am I upset? If it's expressing to your team. And again, I am not saying this is easy. I'm not saying that what you have to do is easy. I'm not saying that you can always do it. But the element of, guys, there's ABC pressures. By you not doing this, this is what this looks like. And you are upset, but you're not screaming. Because also, if I shout at you, chances are, message not received. I'm looking at the tone. I'm like, man, this dude's screaming. And you could be saying something extremely valid, but I'm like, nah, I've taken offense. And no matter what it is you were trying to tell me, like the packaging was wrong. So it does people a disservice. It can be like, yeah, you were justifiably angry, but then at the same time, was that the best way that you could have possibly communicated? And that is hard. Yeah.
For me, if someone is shouting at me, my mind, boom, there's a wall. I'm not even listening. I'm pretty sure the same thing happens with me at work. So let me give you a scenario for today. For example, today, I was super stressed since 3-4 days because there's so much going on. And in terms of getting a certain structure built, that the next few days will be an easy flow. So in terms of hiring people, placing them, allocating them. So I mentioned to you what I did before I just came to work, and it was super stressful. You know, again, you understand government jobs are crazy, right? There's so much pressure. So I'm setting up people I'm trying to give sheets to like team leaders. Like, this is how your team will be, this is how it will be. And I'm using like a green pen and I'm writing, this is how it's going to be, A to Z. Again, at the back of my mind, there's stress. I've done that. I come to him last, that team leader, and I tell him, show me the sheet, what have you done? He's done crap on the sheet. Mm-hmm. So I told him in Swahili, "Hii kazi umeandika ni ghasia." So he flips the sentence and says that you're calling me shit. I'm like, no, I didn't call you shit. I said the work you've done is shit. So he made a big issue. He started shouting. I'm like, why are you raising your tone? Shut up. Right? If you want to address it, there's a procedure. Go and write a grievance letter to the HR. Say that I called you shit when there were about 10 people around. I said, no, the work that you've done is shit. It's a commonly used word. The guy pushed me and I flipped. And I honestly flipped. So now relating stress and then all of it coming to anger, this triggers, right? I'm a man. I have triggers. Even he knows I have triggers. My wife knows I have triggers. There's some things that you don't push me because I'm a work in progress. There's so much that I've done to stop getting triggered from the past. Yes, before I wasn't very temperamental, but of late, life, pressure, family, there's so much shit happening. So how do you, now the trigger, how do you come to that point where you be like, bro, you're going to bust out, can you stop? Or like, you're pushing me and how do I keep myself calm? You see the way you're super calm, you're chill and everything. And then me still in my head, even right now, I'm like, that donut. Then I start overthinking. So there's the stress, linking it to anger. And then after that, I'm just overthinking about the situation because probably he's chilling and having a beer somewhere right now. And I have these 3 points where I want to understand, like, coming from your perspective, how would you deal with something like that?
So for me, anger is something which I've had a history of learning how to deal with because it used to scare me, getting angry. Like, we've met and everything, and for me, the anger was strong, and I didn't want to, let's say, hurt anybody. So let's say I got mad, and I really wanted to, like, show somebody I'm angry. That could have disastrous consequences. And there is no explanation which is worth it. It'll be like you injured this person. At the worst end of it, maybe somebody might lose their life. It sounds extreme, but these accidents do happen. And then what am I saying? He pissed me off. And you're like, that isn't nearly good enough. For those things, it's not that you don't feel angry. It's in those kind of scenarios, one, what's going to be beneficial to you. So this person is pissed off, they're not listening. Then you remove yourself. Be like, we'll talk when you're calm. They can shout and froth and foam all they want to, but I'm not going to be here for this because we will have a shouting match. And after that shouting match, what is the benefit going to be? So usually the things you have in place are to protect yourself from getting to a place where you feel like you need to shout. Again, you're not always going to manage. But if you've told somebody and they're thinking, it's like, no, keep your tone quiet. We'll discuss this when you're calm. And it's not, you're not asking them, you're saying, that is what we will do. And you leave it. So then you disengage because an argument has to happen with two people. So we have to have a back and forth. And if I'm remove myself from it, yeah, I'll be upset, but it's like, no, you're not doing that with me. Like, I don't know who you think you're dealing with, but I'm not the one who's for this. And then you will be upset. And you let yourself feel it. Yeah, curse to high heaven if you want to. You feel it and then let it pass. Don't try to bypass it completely and be like, I'm not angry. Nah, be upset, be angry. Be like, that dude sucks, man. Honestly, it was easy work. He's incompetent. I hate him. All that kind of stuff. Let it out your system and then deal with it. But do not try to deal with it at the peak of the emotion because you won't manage. You won't, because now he's tripping and you're like, do you know how stressful government work is? These dudes have no idea. My phone's blowing up. The family is, they don't know any of that. Yeah. And they're just an addition to it. So do not try to deal with things at the peak of the emotion. I say that generally, but specifically for me as well. There's been times I've wanted to hit the roof and I had to ask, who is this going to help? And then the worst thing is, it would be really nice. You have those power fantasies. Like, oh man, I'm going to just like knock this guy, I'm going to throw him through.
Especially with your height and build.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to show him. And then what? Chances are, you wouldn't really feel better. And then you have to deal with the consequence of, no matter how wrong he was, now you put hands on him. Now who's the wrong one? Yeah. Now you're saying he has to talk to HR. Now you can definitely talk to HR and be like, hey, man, he hit me. I had 10 witnesses. He really hit me. And so you give yourself so much more grief for a moment of something which, even if it's justifiable, try to postpone it as much as you can. And if possible, get out of the situation. They might not like it. Somebody might follow you, shout after you, be like, I am not dealing with this right now because I can't. And then you approach it when you've cooled down a bit.
So that's now the part where you're managing the angry moment.
Mm-hmm.
Coming to stress, there are two types of stress. There's a positive stress and there's a negative stress.
Mm-hmm.
Work stress is positive or negative. I don't know, depending
What
on
do you-
what
What do you
toxic.
mean by positive or negative
No, there is.
stress?
I'm sure
it's eustress and de-stress. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's I've read it somewhere. So work stress is kind of positive stress because if you have that pressure, then you're working well. Otherwise, you're just like chilled out. Now the negative stress is the toxicity, probably around depending on where you work or at home or relationships or whatever. How do you deal with that?
They're on the same scale because like what you were talking about is right. So stress will make you perform better. Let's say you have a deadline. You will put in more work because you know I have to make this deadline up until a point. You'll push, and then there's a sharp drop off in terms of now I can't even function the way I usually do because I'm too stressed out. I can't focus, I can't think, I can't deliver. So managing it is that point of realizing how much stress you can deal with. And then when it's getting too much, changing things around as much as you can. You can't like stop working. Like we have to work. We genuinely do. But if you're in, let's say your workspace, now you look at the things like, for example, this interaction that you had, choosing not to have it, be like, I'm not going to become angry because of this guy who clearly didn't do what he was supposed to do. It isn't worth my rage. And you remove yourself. So as opposed to, it's like giving somebody the power to piss you off. That's what you've done. It's like he was wrong and he doesn't have to acknowledge the fact he was wrong to be wrong. So you kind of remove somebody's ability to influence what you feel and you're the one who controls it. Again, it takes a lot of work, but with your stress, and you'll realize you guys like push yourselves a lot. There'll be the times you can and there'll be the times that you can't. You'll be like something which is usually easy is now hard. You're overdrawn. You've done too much. And so what you're trying to manage is getting to the point when you understand when things are becoming too much and then stepping back in ways that you can or finding pockets of time where you don't have to deal with the stressors you have. As you said with work is a constant stressor for most people. Whether that's the workload or your colleagues suck. Your colleagues, it's a bad boss. But let's say, for example, your supervisor or your boss is somebody who you hate and you know that they are. Why would you give them the ability to make you angry every day? You wake up and you know this person sucked yesterday, they're going to suck today, and news flash, tomorrow they're not going to get any better. If you know that for a fact, then you think, so if the common denominator is their behavior, what am I going to shift so that this person doesn't consistently stitch me up? And that's what it becomes, because you can't change other people. You can't force the change, like be better. You can't. But if you understand that, then it becomes, what am I going to do in my workplace? Things like not being available after hours. Those things for, I'm not going to talk to this person on a Monday morning. I won't. They're going to mess up my whole week. No matter what it is, I know for a fact, I'm going to avoid them. They don't have to know that you're avoiding them, but you're doing that for yourself. So it's the little pockets of things that you make which help you deal with it. Because I can't say, oh yeah, just take off work. It's like, that's not a viable thing to do because you have to work. But it's how are you working and what are you doing for yourself in the workplace?
Also like that you mentioned disengaging. I feel like since growing up, we weren't really taught how to deal with emotions. And one of the best ways to deal with them, I've learned, is disengaging, even from the world if you can, and just sit down and take a couple of breaths. And the most important is feeling your emotions, right? Which people don't. People, I'm not angry. No, I'm not sad. No, it's just that. It's just that. But I'm not angry. But then it just bottles up and you become this pressure cooker, right? And eventually then when someone comes and gives you work that's not been done properly, you just blow
It's
up.
over for you.
Or just have a beer and have a nice cold white cup and everything feels better.
No, but we were talking about it. We were talking about methods people use to cope. So actually, good segue.
Yeah.
We can jump into that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So we were speaking about alcohol or drug abuse as one of the methods people use to cope. Why do you feel like that's not a viable option?
Because the more stress you have, the more you lean on your coping mechanism. And if your coping mechanism is unhealthy, you're going to do it more. And let's say for drinking, for example, the more you drink, it only goes one way. You need more drink to get the same effect. Like you were saying, that cold white cap. Then after a while, that cold white cap doesn't slap the way it used to. It's like, nah, but 2 white caps though. And then it's 2 white caps. And that's the standard. And then after the second one, you're like, a 3rd white cap. And that's what happens. And it's gradual. So it's not that one day you're drinking 1, then the next day you're drinking 6. But let's give you like a 5-year span. And then you're sitting on your ones and you can polish off a 6-pack and still be okay. Now look at what's happened to your habit, because work is busy. You have all these things to deal with. If it's family, friends, all these stressors, and the coping mechanism, it just goes up. It's like for that element of what liquor will do for you. You feel like you don't have to worry about things. It's just that feeling of, I'm relaxing. You need more and more of it. And then that becomes addiction. And it's funny because with addiction, it starts early because it's just, it's a graph. And so someone will be like, I'm not an addict, he's an addict. I'm like, you guys are on the same path. He's just further ahead. I guarantee you didn't start where he was, but it's the gradual nature. And you have to ask yourself, if I'm that stressed and I'm doing something which affects me negatively, you are literally you're on the path and accelerating your way to addiction. And it's a word people don't like to hear, but you have to be honest in terms of what are you using it for? How often are you using it? And is it increasing? And it increases for people. If you say 5 years ago, how much did you used to drink? Someone will be like, hardly anything. And now, be like, if I drank now what I used to drink 5 years, I'd pass out. Like I won't be able to manage. But it's the gradual nature of things that makes something more and more entrenched.
Well, you put me into a thought process. I used to drink probably a whole bottle. And now I'm like, when did I drink last? I've actually not drank in a while. So my coping mechanism was alcohol, because that's what I saw pretty much all my life. Because my dad was an alcoholic. I've addressed it in the podcast before, but for me, it was such a good temporary feeling that I could suppress my shit and forget about all the stresses that I have. So, again, I had financial stress being one of the biggest. But I'm an idiot not to realize that I'm spending money to get drunk.
Exactly.
It's stupid, I know. I realize all this now at the age of 30, but it's sad. And now I'm like, do I really need a beer? But when we went out and we celebrated that we've achieved a milestone of this many podcasts that we've recorded, I'm like, dude. Even he came, he's like, dude, let's just go celebrate.
It felt good.
It felt so good. So he had 1, I had 3. But again, that's what he's saying.
But it's better than before.
Yeah.
And I used to drink as well. And here's what it used to be. The week is tough. And you're like, oh man, it's a tough week. I know what I'm going to get for myself. And you do that, and the hangover is awful. And then you spend time trying to get back to normalcy to punish yourself again. And when you look at it, and you'll talk with your friends like, yeah, we know it's bad, but we do it regardless. And you just have to ask yourself honestly, is there space for this thing in my life? Because the more you do, the more space it takes. And then now it becomes, like you're saying, financial stress. Then you're like, oh man, I wish I had more money. I'm like, them drinks ain't cheap.
True.
But it seems like the drink buying is a non-negotiable thing. So you're not even looking at it as a budget that'll reduce, like, but I have to buy the drinks. Why do you have to buy the drinks? How am I supposed to de-stress? It'd be like, now you see, you're making things tighter than they need to be because of something which, and again, once in a while, and I'm not trying to, vilify alcohol as a whole, but moderation is key, and a lot of people lack that. So it's controlling you. You'll be like, no, I can stop whenever I want to. And you look at somebody like, so why don't you stop? I don't want to. It's like, okay. So they don't understand that. Along the journey of you thinking that, I'm drinking and I'm in control of this, there came a tipping point when you needed these drinks, and you cannot see your week without these things being involved. And that is dangerous because it gets more and more. And the more you do something, you only have one body. Your body's going to tell you. The same way most people say when they were young, oh, I didn't used to get hangovers, it was fine. Then you age and your body's letting you know, this is a poison. If you were going to read a description of what being poisoned feels like, this is what it is. And you're like, nah, it's just a Saturday night. So that's the way it goes. Mm.
I think you just made me think of this. I was rewarding myself from all the stresses and the anger and the emotions. So for me to just cover it up because I wasn't dealing with it, I would reward myself with alcohol, saying that all that is fine now.
But it's extremely temporary if you think about it.
Oh,
So,
yeah, for sure.
So when you are drunk, it's like, oh, this might be great. It doesn't last for that long. You're gonna
Next
wake
day
up
in the morning, you're like, not again. you're hungover and you're like, I still have the same problems.
and they were just waiting for you. Like now you have the same issues with a headache. It's like, and now deal with it. And so it postpones it. And again, alcohol is a depressant, so it makes you feel jovial, but it's a downer, and you don't think it is. But what it'll do is the stuff that you don't deal with, it now comes more to the surface because inhibitions and all those kind of things drop and it can become destructive. And again, it's not like that for everybody, but a lot of people are on that path and they do not realize that if you keep going that way, there will come a point when this thing will really, really do damage to you. And so if you can avoid it, then you absolutely should.
So let's look at it the other way around, where the coping mechanism for stress, anger, and all that is, let's say, alcohol, drugs, and many other, let's say, bad methods. Let's go to the good methods. I think one that's really worked out for me is going to the gym. Is there anything else you'd want to add?
I think the gym is essentially, you use it interchangeably with like exercise. So going to the gym doesn't necessarily mean like lifting weights. We laugh at people like it's what I enjoy doing, but it doesn't mean it's what you have to do. Moving around physically is almost a cheat code in terms of what it can do for you. I think I've read a lot of stuff about exercise. It's almost ridiculous. It's like it'll help your memory, it helps your mood, it helps your joints, it helps you. And you're like, what? All this stuff just because I decide to move around? And it doesn't have to be intense. Different people have different levels of things. But a moderate level of activity consistently, a lot of these issues that we're talking about, it moderates it. You'll feel better, like the way you feel after you go to the gym. Those kind of things, the endorphins that you might get after you push yourself. Those are chemicals your body is giving you because, good job, you pushed. Now here's this thing which isn't bad for you. And so most people will say they don't have the time. You need to make it. And people are busy. But I'm not saying that you have to become a world-class athlete. But just move around more than you're doing now. And a simple change like that will pay such dividends that you'll even be shocked. For me, I was telling you when we were talking off camera, was a point, psychology work, like it's important. We're helping people. And so now I'd push
for our Spotify listeners, go to YouTube and see his reaction.
I'd push my own well-being aside and be like, nah, I gotta help. I gotta do more therapy. It's backwards because I wasn't in a good spot. Yeah, sure, I was helping people, but at what cost? And when you make that priority, yeah, sure, I was still busy, but it would be like, I have to do this. And it helped. And there were still stresses, there was still work, but I felt better because I made it a priority, because work is always a priority. You'll say like, I have to go to work. Do you prioritize the other stuff as well? Because if you do, then you'll put it in a place where even if it's 30 minutes after work, I am going to do this. Are you tired? Yes, you are. But then it's going to be a different kind of fatigue. The one where it's your body, so you're going to rest properly, as opposed to being restless, where you might put your head down and your mind is running 1,000,000 miles a minute. So you're not really resting despite the fact that you're still. So you said, Jim, I'd say physical activity as a whole, whether it's a sport that you play, whether it's going for walks and things, whether you swim, it's broad. But do something, because you might become an adult and people say it's not important. No, it is, because those are the things that set you up. And you won't be trying to start a healthy habit in old age. Because a lot of the damage we do, we'll do it when we're young, and then you'll pay for it later. So if you start a healthy habit, it's a lot easier to maintain. For example, you're going to the gym now, and some days it might be challenging, but because you do it, it's kind of something that you know how to do, but you had to learn how to do it. And then it becomes easier. And if something is easier, it's more consistent, and consistency is the name of the game.
But to be honest, I haven't gone to the gym since April.
So now at this point, we'll say you can always go back.
You can always go back.
No, I think it's our season's pretty much our season's ending. So
Yeah, our season's about to end. So
so
you can go back to the gym.
I think we've quite pre-recorded for the till next year.
But again, you see, you put in that hard work, and you can always go back. But also, you're planning to.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So it's not that you're saying, man, the gym is over with. You're planning to do it, and that's important. It's like, no, progress over perfection.
And also I've paid for it. Put it on hold. But anyways, yeah.
So what other methods besides movement?
So it's movement, and then as we are talking about, the self-reflection is key, because a lot of times people don't want to stop because you're afraid of the answers that you might get. And it can be a frightening thing to inquire, whether you're doing it with the help of somebody else or by yourself. How did I get here? Those kind of things, when you take the time out to, and some people don't like being still because now you're left alone with your thoughts. And so you might want to fill the time with company or drink or drugs because you can't stand your own thought process. So it's the element of being able to think or introspect. And again, that you practice. And it doesn't have to start with all the answers, but those the why questions. This used to really frustrate me. So when you're training for psychology, it's like, you're going to help people. Okay, so what's going on in that head of yours? So they tell you the why questions, like, why do you believe what you believe, and why are you the way you are? Those things are frustrating. Why do you believe this? Because this happened. Why? And the whys go to a point when you're like, I was always like that. It's like, not always. There was a point when you might have picked something up. Often it's from home, family, parents. That's usually the inception point for most people. And be like, okay, if you pick that up there, do you have to continue to carry it? And is it beneficial to you? And now it's tough because you are grappling with something which has been the fabric of your being for so long, but it is not, serving you in any way. So you have to begin to let these things go, which have been with you for the majority of your life. Then you have an identity crisis. Like, if not for this, who am I? And it's like, well, in all honesty, life is still going on, and you can decide the kind of person who you want to be. But again, difficult work, optional work. You don't have to ask yourself, why do I believe this so strongly? And then a lot of people also don't like to replace false information with new correct information. So if you've believed something for 10 plus years and I tell you, hey, this is false, you look at it and be like, I'm going to be stubborn and keep my old belief despite the fact that there's something new. So movement, getting to know yourself better. And that often means not having anything to distract you and genuinely asking, how am I doing? The answer can be bad. It's like, okay, I am doing bad. Why am I doing bad? And then you start to build slowly. So you make it as simple as you possibly can. So it's simple but difficult, if that makes sense. Where the questions are not complex, but answering them can be a hard thing.
When you start unlocking those layers, it's not a nice thing. It's the truth. As a man, it's not a nice thing. If you're told that, for example, like, you have anger issues, you have trigger issues, and when you sit and you start unlocking those layers, and you're like, really? Is that me? Or when you go for therapy, he'll tell you, bro, you have childhood trauma, you have this, and I'm like, oh my Lord, this is where all of this was rooted from.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where we want to have this conversation, bring all the men to the point where don't be shy away from getting a reality check.
Mm-hmm.
If your friend tells you that, hey, sometimes you really need to listen to me because I always listen to you, take a step back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You have anger issues, step back. Try to figure out why he's saying that.
Mm-hmm.
Or why is your therapist telling you that you have trigger issues because of your childhood trauma? It'll be like, who are you to tell me that I have childhood trauma just because my company sent me for a counseling session? You have to be open to all these things, opening to listen. Because for me, initially, I was very, very, very reluctant in terms of, why would someone tell me something and I'm a self-made man, I have so much ego up my ass, and who are you? That was me before.
Mm-hmm.
And now if someone tells me, I'll sit back and be like, okay, shit, I should have done this. This is a flaw that I have. How can I work on the flaw? And then even going back to, shit, this flaw really, the conversation where this flaw probably might have hurt so many people around me. But this is where men, we're hard-headed, bro. We are really, really hard-headed. And why we wanted to have this conversation is because I know even in our circle, we have people who are, I don't know. I don't know how we can help them. It's tough, man, having the tough conversation.
The thing about it is you can't always. And that's the important thing. So you've asked about therapy. Therapy is not magic. It isn't. You don't sit down and I look into the depths of your soul and tell you these things. It's a lot of listening. And then I am not walking the journey for you. It's you will help people. And if you're doing it right, you're essentially talking yourself out of a job. So if we're doing this well, you're not going to need me as much because the tools I impart, you can apply when I'm not there. And so usually it might start weekly. And as we make progress, now the gaps get bigger, maybe bi-weekly. That's the way it's supposed to go. Now, the thing you were saying about willingness to change and acceptance, I've had people, they come in like, there's nothing wrong with me. And it's like, you know what? I'm not going to force you. That is not what this job is, where I'm dragging you along. If somebody wants to make changes, then that is when the progress happens. Be like, I always give my best. But you tell the person, it's work. So you're sitting here and there's pain and everything. We can work through it, but you have to be willing to try. If you're not and you're closed off, be like, it doesn't have to work. And you can't point at me and say, why didn't you do your job if you weren't willing to participate? That's what I tell people. Be like, you have to do your part. If I ask you to do something and you don't do it, you can't expect the progress to magically happen. Like, oh, I just got better. Be like, no. So therapy is a great tool, but like with most tools, if you use it properly. But just because somebody has been to therapy, it doesn't mean that they're automatically well adjusted.
There's this one phrase that sticks with me. Even I'm sure, and she did like this: "You gotta put in the work. You gotta put in the work."
So again, so going back to the tools, because some tools work, some don't. What other tools can people try to employ to manage anger?
So,
and wait, before we get to that, the thing of sitting down and self-reflection, would you link that to journaling?
Journaling helps. The beautiful thing about journaling is it takes a snapshot of your thoughts. Thoughts change. You might think about today and tomorrow, because you're in a different spot, the day changes. Like you might massage something, stuff might feel better. If you write something down when you're feeling it, as you read it, it shows you where you were at the current time, which is extremely powerful. So journaling works for some people. Some people record themselves. But generally, taking something outside of your head is good because then it doesn't shift with the new thoughts or feelings that you're getting. So it's like, that's actually how I felt. Not the next day you might be like, was I that upset? It's like, no, yeah, you were really, really upset. And there is a snapshot of what you were feeling. And that's important to do. So journaling is really good for people.
Okay. So now on to the other tools.
So we talked about what? Physical stuff. And then we talked about the self-reflection element. The thing about it is, when you talk about, anger, stress, or managing, you need to find something which is separate from the thing which is triggering you in a sense. So if you understand where the trigger is, doing something which is as far away from that as possible. So if it's work, the things that you do outside of work that have nothing to do with it, that is important. And make sure that your free time isn't filled with more work, for example. Because then you're doing yourself a disservice. Like, I've left work. You haven't really. Like, if it's still what you're thinking about nowadays with the advent of online and stuff, it's very possible to not physically be at the office and still be fully involved in what it is that you do for your vocation. So the separation from the things that can bring you anger and stress, sometimes it can be people. So it's doing different things, and you can tell yourself, these things make me angry and it's no fault of my own, but it's like, what are you actively doing to make sure that your contact with them is minimized? And then that gets into the responsibility is yours, and this is the unfair thing about everything that we're talking about. Somebody can do you wrong. They really can. It is your responsibility to make sure that you're okay. It's like, yeah, but if they didn't, and I'm like, yeah, but they did. And because they have, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to fester and hold on to this thing and use it as an excuse to lash out at other people? What if that's exactly what they did to you? What if things are tough for them at home? I'm pretty sure you don't care about that. It's not your fault that things are tough at their place, but what you're getting is the sharp end of the stick and they're bringing it to your doorstep. So you have to make sure that you don't perpetuate the same things. And that's one of the most difficult things with therapy or applying tools. It's things weren't fair before. They really, really were. Now it's on you. And if you can't get past that injustice, then you're unlikely to want to do the work, because you can't force them to, apologize or to say, I'm really, really sorry that I'm a terrible person. That doesn't happen, let me say, much. Some people do apologize. But for the most part, realizing that the responsibility is yours, it can be difficult, but it's also a really beautiful thing, because then you have control. Because a lack of control means that you can't make any changes. But if it's on you, be like, exactly that. It's on you, so you can actually do something, as opposed to thinking that no matter what, these things are just going to happen to you.
You've mentioned the word responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
The role as a man,
Mm-hmm.
especially in our communities, we have to, take care of our parents,
Mm-hmm.
be very tight-knit, probably live in the same house. For me, the burden has been from probably the age of 18,
Okay.
I've been running the house. So from paying the rents to the bills, my younger brother's university, taking care of the household, just the pressure, the constant pressure that I have to keep delivering. Sometimes I lose myself, man. Because it's every single day you wake up, be like, if you don't do X, Y, Z, or you don't keep pushing, you'll fail 1, 2, 3. The biggest fear is, failing all the people around you. So every constant day you're like, oh shit, man, my legs are hurting, my back is hurting, I have a constant headache. For example, I got to do this shit all over again. So this pressure, the responsibility as a man, how would you deal with all of that?
It's interesting, because the stuff that you're talking about is redefining what it means. So all these roles and all these responsibilities, but are you simply an accumulation of your responsibilities, or are you a person as well? So were you aiming to seem like you're this metronome who never falters? Was that your goal? It might have been. Be like, the thing that I want is to make sure I never falter. Or was the goal to be like, of course I'm going to do this for my family, but please understand that things get hard for me as well. And you shouldn't look at me as if, it's science fiction when I get to the point when I say, I can't. Because many men think, and they'll say things, usually it's the generational conversations, like, men used to just do all these kind of things. Those dudes were suffering. 1,000% they were suffering. There was no outlet. And so now what we're having, like these conversations, it's realizing that, sure, you have a lot of responsibility, but do you also have space to not perform at times? Is there room for you to say, this is hard, I can't today? And somebody to tell you, okay. As opposed to, if you say that, someone like, you're not a man. And it's like, I don't stop being a man because I'm tired. I don't stop being a man because I'm burnt out, because I'm sad. What does it mean to be a man? These are the definitions we have. And it changes. A lot of times I hear conversations about people being soft. And I'm like, the thing about the spectrum is you can be on one side of it, which is I never show my emotions, and you have unhealthy coping mechanisms. And sure, there are some people who aren't emotionally regulated and they need to, have thicker skin. But usually you're looking for a balance where it's when there's difficulty in your family unit and you're talking about responsibility and the head of the home responsibilities. Doesn't that also mean that you can change the way things look? In terms of, you're looking to me for all these kind of things, but in the household which I am running, this is a space where emotions aren't these dirty words that we don't talk about. It's realizing that I cannot do this all the time without faltering. I am doing this to the best of my ability. And sometimes things aren't so good. And what does that mean? It simply means, things weren't so good because it's hard. Not that the whole content of your character shifts and you suddenly become less than. So usually the responsibility in the household is, because there's so much sway and power that you might have, it's, are you moving the needle in terms of, this is what it's going to mean. Being a man isn't going to be such a narrow definition anymore. We're going to be able to speak about the fact that I too have difficulties. And again, I am not going to stop endeavoring to do all that I can do, but understand that it comes at a cost, and a cost that I sometimes can't pay. And that's all right.
Oh, I'm speechless.
And I think also, like you mentioned earlier, you mentioned that are you your own person or are you your responsibilities? And I think just linking that back to stuff like when you're out of work, you check out. You don't take that on to the rest of the day. So segment your days. That would be something that would be really helpful in such a case, right?
Absolutely.
So that you have your releases, because I very much relate to that, because right now it's just work. Next day again, work. But then I do remember the days where I set aside my time for, self-love. I set aside my time for, I'm just going to watch TV and just completely forget. And in those moments, I'm way happier and I'm definitely less angry and less frustrated.
No, for sure. And we talk about the separation. So like my dad told me once, talking about work, and he was like, my job is what I do, not who I am. And I was like, damn. I was like,
He gave you therapy the whole sentence.
I was like, those are some bars, Pops. But realistically, for so many men, it's the same. It's like, I'm a businessman. And it's like, okay, and what else? If you're not working, who are you? What are you? If you are not, like, provision is important, but it can't be the only thing that you are. And do the people around you understand that? Do they understand that your value is more than what you can give? Your value is intrinsic. It is who you are as an individual. And that's the shift. Because if the value is intrinsic, like you were saying, the times when you're doing for yourself and you're happy, you're not thinking, I guess I'm not a man today because I didn't suffer or sweat or provide. No. That's part of the journey as well, and you need that. So it's more of a balance. So it helps a lot more with the responsibilities that you do have, because you also have a balance. You were saying it's work, and there's things that you want to achieve, but it's also knowing that there's times I'm not going to be working as hard, and those are just as important as the times I'm pushing myself, because you do yourself a disservice, and you can actually do less if you're always pushing too much. Because you just can't. And it'll come out in ways where you realize, I have nothing left to give. And to the best of your ability, you want to be able to manage getting to those points and realize that I can't always. And people around you who will look at you and be like, okay. I'm not going to look at you any differently because you're a human being and not a robot.
So the reason why I asked about that was all my life. So let me give you perspective.
Sure.
Very big family, dad alcoholic, kind of everyone disconnected from him. So indirectly disconnected from my mom and my younger brother and I. So for me, it was always more of like, I'm going to prove this guy's wrong. I would be out just because we were, at that time, we were kind of poor, facing financial difficulties. And they always felt that if they come close to us, we'll probably borrow money or they'll have to do us a favor. So they'd look away, and we were young kids, man. For me, it was kind of trauma, because I'm like, this is my uncle. He's my blood uncle. Why the hell is he looking away from me? My cousins would not talk to me. I was like, what the fish, right? So
Haven't you sworn already?
Yeah. So for me, it was all about like putting my name out there and gaining that respect. It's something that is very important to me right now. I made sure that I build a network that is so strong, better than my family being there for me. Having friends around me who can be there for me, better than my family. Having businesses or a job that puts me out there, that is way better than what they're doing. So it was a low-key, burning ego that I want to keep doing this because I need to gain respect and prove them wrong. Just last week, I lost my uncle. Actually, it's my cousin brother. But I used to call him uncle because he was way older to me.
Sorry about that, man.
Yeah, thanks. And when all of those guys were there, I'm like, all these years I was trying to satisfy my ego, trying to think that, that when I'm doing better, you guys will feel bad. And I'm like,
nobody cares.
Nobody cares. Like, nobody cares. Still, it's the same shit. Like, you go there, they don't have respect for you. And I'm like, I was doing all this so I can gain respect, but still, they look at you like you're a piece of shit. Till today, the look in when they see you, it's like you're a piece of shit. Yes, they're the collective few, the two families that I'm close to. But the rest, man, I'm like, dude, we have a very big family here. But if someone asks you, like, where do you come from? Who's your grandfather? And when they hear that, they're like, oh, man, you guys are a prestige family in Kenya. You guys came back in the day. Little do they know, man. So because of that, the us being prestige, having a very big prestige firm, none of them know the background story. So when you're low, I was so programmed into like, I'm going to prove them wrong. I'm going to prove them wrong. I want to gain their respect. I want to gain their respect. But now this is two ways that I want to come to. I was doing this to kind of seek validation from them, which they didn't give a shit about. But then there's also like gaining respect in terms of like doing good things.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your thought process about that?
I think it's interesting because the question I'd have for you is, you strive to get all these things. Are you enjoying them?
Oh yeah, for sure. Now when I reflect, I'm like, I was doing it indirectly to like prove it, to show it. But now I go back and I rewind and I'm like, hey, oh, look at what I've built. I'm super grateful. Coming from scratch. One human being, as much as he could. My mother is super happy now. She came out of a shithole, from family to abusive husband to whatever. Every time he knows my mom is jolly now. She's happy. She's genuinely doing fine. She doesn't need therapy because she'll never step. But this is her therapy, seeing that we kids are doing well. We have a home now. Not a shitty mabati roof and like rats running around and those wooden doors that are all eaten up by termites. So that's the situation we've come out from. So now that is the kind of satisfaction I get. But the only reason why I'm speaking loud about it, that we do things for other people, thinking that you're going to get like a kind of sense of validation from them, but it's all wrong.
Yeah, it is. And also it's those things nobody told you it would happen. So you kind of manufacture a narrative and you go on that path and it can motivate you. But you look at somebody as if, is this somebody who is determining whether what I'm doing is worthwhile? Why them? Why is it so important that they look at me and say, oh, you've done good? No, so the reasoning has to shift. And with family, and it's very difficult with family especially, where there's a quote that I love. What is it? Actually, you guys know the quote, blood is thicker than water.
Mm-hmm.
The full quote is the opposite. It's the blood of the covenant is thicker than the waters of the womb, which means that the relationships that you choose can be more important than the ones that you're born into. So people often use family and you're like, oh, we're related. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Are you putting in the requisite effort to make sure the bond is strong? Or is it just a convenient thing to say, oh, that's my family? So what you choose to do can be more important than we're blood. And it's like, well, you need to act like it. Otherwise, it's not a free pass to treat me any kind of way and always have access to my life. And in some of our communities, that'll be like a real faux pas. Like, you can't say that to family. And it's like, yes, I can. Respect is a two-way street. If this person is treating me terribly, why should I always be open to terrible treatment? I don't need you anymore. And then somebody will be upset because you're not open to be abused. Like, hey, stay close so I can abuse you. It's like, no, I don't think so. I don't want that anymore. And so you make those choices. So with what you're saying, the realization of, I don't need them in that kind of way. Not that like you wish them harm. And if you do, hey, that's up to you. But the understanding that I don't have to do this anymore because I don't need them in that kind of way. And that's okay, because if they cared about the relationship, then they would have treated you better. It wasn't because of you that they acted the way they acted. And when you stop almost like making excuses for people, that's when you get to the place for, no, they treated me terribly and I've had about enough. And someone will be like, how can you abandon them? It's like, don't talk about abandoning, because at every juncture, at every chance they had, they made me feel less than. And now I'm just taking that option away.
All right.
He's clearly good at his job.
Really good at it. I feel like fear is a really good tool or a really good motivator for people to change.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, do you agree with me or you don't?
Yes, and everything within limits.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
I want you to share what would be the worst things that would happen to people should they continue down the route of not managing their anger and not managing the stress. And what have you seen in your practice?
Okay, at the risk of sounding dramatic, death.
Drama.
No, death. That's the worst, because if you can't control your anger and you're in situations where you're too quick to anger and you lose your temper, what can that lead to? You can be in situations which can end up being fatal. Because of a moment of madness, you can lose your life, somebody else can lose theirs. There can be, you think your life is bad now, but obviously you can be arrested for things. And in the more psychological element, you'll be alone. You know, just what you were saying, in fact, it's really great in terms of the way people treat you. And then you get to the place where you realize you don't need them anymore. If you spend your whole life being abrasive, there comes a point you're not going to be young anymore. You're not going to be able to do for yourself. You're going to need to rely on others. And they're going to look at you like, but why would I do that? If when you were able to, you treated me in this way, you're alone now. Because people don't want to be around you. And that's of your own doing. So men will talk about it. Let's say you have things. You have a good job, all that kind of stuff. And be like, what if the money goes? What if something happens? Is the only reason that you have these kind of things because of the finances that you've earned? Or is it the quality of your character? And if you don't have that, what you'll find very quickly is people don't want to be around you. Why would they? Often families, people's kids be like, no, I don't want to see my parent. Why would I want to see them? Because of all the things that they did previously. So the element of being abandoned because people don't have to stick around. Some do, but by and large, people are making choices where they realize, I don't need this anymore. And you can talk about the explanations of tough things happen to me and be like, it's really not an excuse. It hasn't been an excuse for a very, very long time. And you have become the beginning point in our story. You are the bad thing. Despite the way you like to complain about the bad thing that happened to you, it's here you go, following those same footsteps.
One thing about men is now understanding the emotions in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to speak about my experience.
Okay.
I'm married. We've spoken about anger, stress, everything. But in a marriage, it's very different.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I feel.
Okay.
Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. The stress levels don't even come from work or something. It might be something pressing. Or if you come, why do you put your shoes this way? It should be this way. Or I like the pillow this way, why do you put it this way? Now, these are things that really, really build up low-key, and then it busts out in a very bad way. How do you communicate about the emotions that you feel as a man to your partner?
Often. So, you talk about buildup. That is what you do not want. What you want to cultivate with your person is the ability to address things, again, not immediately, but if something has disturbed you, I would want to have this conversation. And as we said earlier, when the emotions have cooled, but if you're postponing it, you make sure you do it. So you don't say, let's talk about this, and then not. We'll talk about it, then not address it. You have to bring it back up because you want your partner to be able to understand you and look at you in the kind of way as you are a person who has the range of the full emotional spectrum. And I guess to talk about women for a sec, not in a disrespectful way, there's the expectations men have of themselves, and there could be the expectations women have of men. And so what I found sometimes is that women will want an emotionally intelligent man in theory, but not in practice. So it sounds good. And then when he starts to express his emotions, they kind of be like, but why are you feeling feelings? And it's like, no, they're there. So there has to be a willingness for her to also understand. So there's how you're communicating it, which you work on. And then from her side, it's, am I listening to the stuff that he's actually saying? And there'll be the times when a rebuttal isn't required, where you say, I feel this way. And then it's, well, you feeling that way makes me feel this way. That's not a conversation because we've taken it from what you're feeling and now you're not the focus anymore. So it's the consistency of communicating the things that disturb you. And if it's those things like shoes, pillows, things being just so, it's the common ground of understanding what somebody likes. And if a habit obviously isn't like a bad habit, if it's just particulars, looking and realizing, I know for a fact that my partner likes things this way, then you shift it. And then she might come and see and be like, oh, damn, this is exactly the way I like it. That didn't take much effort on your part. But what does that do? It shows that somebody's attentive. It's like something that you might like just so, and then she does it. You'll come home from Jobo, that guy was messing about, you'll be like, I'm angry. You'll see it and be like, somebody cares. Small things, but that just shows that you're observant and that you're willing to accommodate the person who you're with. As you're saying, you're married, that's the person who like you spend the most time with, and you know her in the way that she knows you. But what do you do with that knowledge? And that's how you build those things up.
Interesting. Yeah, I just said pillow and slipper. Don't kill me, babe. It was just an example.
But it's great. It's great that you brought up that conversation, because I see. Okay, I'm going to talk about my parents.
Man, feel free. Yeah.
And no, like all the love to them. But there's one thing that I see that they do is that same thing where the feelings are reversed onto each other, and then it stops becoming a conversation and starts becoming more of like, oh, you did this. Oh, no, you did. I did that because you did that. Oh, no, I did that because you did that. And it's more of like no one's listening to each other. So let's give some advice to the parents out there.
I think that like with what you were describing, a lot of people do that. So what will happen is somebody might upset you, and then like you save it like for a rainy day. So you'll say, that pissed me off. I'm gonna hold on to it. So the moment you do something messed up, it's remember like last Tuesday when you, and it's like, come on, man, that hasn't benefited anything. If it was an issue, address it. Be like, I did not appreciate ABC. And again, not with venom. It's, can we talk about something? This, and then you get into it. So you're not preparing. It's like stacking up armaments for a battle where if somebody's gonna come at me, I'm going to come at them twice as hard. Because
how do you release that anger?
That's why we were talking about the consistency. You don't give it a chance to. If something upsets you today, you've calmed down, deal with it tomorrow. Don't like put it in the pile, because it's very easy and loads of things upset us and we've been stacking them up for years and years and years. So you stop adding. So dealing with things consistently, because things are going to annoy you. That's a given. And they might not intend it. And it's like, I know you didn't intend to upset me. However, I am upset. So now we're discussing the emotion I feel as opposed to saying, what's wrong with you? It's just, this is where I'm at. Maybe I want to talk about it. Maybe I can't. But they know, and they don't have to second guess. It's like if you think somebody's angry and they might be giving you the silent treatment, it's agonizing because could I have done something different? But if somebody tells you, it's okay. At least now I know where you are and we can move from there. So it's a difficult thing to mess up and be like, I messed up. And also realizing if you had the other grievances, it doesn't mean that they've disappeared forever, but that is not the time to address them. You deal with this, you take accountability for what you did and be like, you know what? In the spirit of trying to have better habits, there are things that disturb me that I didn't talk about. Can we get into it? But on a separate occasion. Otherwise, it becomes whataboutism. And be like, now we're tallying all the mistakes we've made, and that's always a lose-lose.
But also if they're two strong personalities, even that's a tough one to crack, right?
It's tough, but strong and stubborn aren't the same thing. A strong personality doesn't mean an abrasive one, you know? And that's kind of the way it's used. Like, I'm hard-headed. I'm like, that's not something to be celebrated. And you can be bullish and determined about things, but that doesn't mean everywhere. Like, you can be, for example, firm at the workplace. Are you going to be the exact same way in the house? Where's the benefit? It's like we're nuanced. We can be different things at different times. And often when people say things like this, it's like, now you're avoiding doing the work. This is just the way I am. And I'm like, I'm sorry, that's not good enough. If this is something which is bringing issues, then you need to work on that. It's like, I have a temper. People got tempers. Like, join the club. Loads of people have tempers. If you're saying that, it means that you have to do more work on it, not less, because you understand that it's difficult for you.
Some interesting
anger management issues.
Well, Aldo, thank you so much for coming on to today's episode of the Men's Forum. Amazing advice. And yeah, I hope a lot of men out there start changing and start learning how to address their anger and stress issues.
No, thanks. If I can just say thanks for having me, guys. It means a bunch. And genuinely, what you're doing, it's important. And guys need it more. Like, we need to have these kind of conversations. So for me, it was an honor and a privilege. And yeah, keep going, man, because this is like watching your stuff. It's those things for, I was just pleased. I was like, I don't even know these dudes. Why do I feel proud in my chest? you know?
Thank you so much.
I was like, they're doing the stuff that they should be doing. So my hats are off to you, and keep it going. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Great. And with that, thank you guys so much for tuning into today's episode of the Men's Forum.
If you have any questions regarding today's episode, feel free to comment below.
And if there's other topics that you want us to discuss in future episodes, let us know as well, and we will see you guys next week.
Like, share, and subscribe. Peace.